Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully it's afternoon where you're at. This is a lunchtime conversation for a lot of people, so I'll try to keep it right to 30 minutes so folks can get on with their day. But thank you for attending our webinar on disaster recovery featuring Rackware. With that, we're going to jump right into it. We got a few slides to go through, and then we're going to launch into a presentation of the actual demo of the software. So a little bit about iArch Solutions. We are a full services EPM and cloud services consultancy. So we do not just EPM, but also partner with all of the major cloud providers to provide general cloud services. We're 100% onshore. We've got offices across the country, as you can see here. We focus on enterprise and Fortune 500 companies. And we offer a number of services, including advisory, application, cloud solutions, cloud infrastructure, general on-premises infrastructure, education, training, you name it. Combined, we have over 110 years of experience. We've done hundreds of successful implementations, lots of cloud migrations. Everybody here is a cloud certified in some fashion, including 4 cloud certified architects. We do cloud services with all of the major providers, and we even have a Oracle ACE on staff. And here are some of the customers that we have done business with over the last year or so. We have a large customer base that we do both managed services for, as well as implementation, application services, things of that nature. Additionally, we are the go-to partner for infrastructure expertise for a number of other vendors, including Oracle, IBM, Deloitte, etc. The whole list is here, but we do a lot of partnering when folks need high-level infrastructure architecture. We're one of the first names in the Rolodex. With all that said, let's actually jump into the topic of today. We're going to be talking about Rackware, which is a software solution that allows us to enhance our offering for migration and disaster recovery services. So Rackware is a hybrid cloud platform. What they really mean by that is the ability to assess, move, and or protect any workload from any data center. So it's a very agnostic tool in terms of how we migrate things. So for example, if you want to move from on-premise to on-premise, then that's not a problem. Like from one data center, let's say in Chicago over to data center you've got in New York, the software can do that for you. It can also enable migration from on-premise to the cloud, or in reverse from cloud back to on-premises. And then of course, it allows you to do backup and disaster recovery solutions that are automated. So that's what we're going to really be focusing on today, is this ability to essentially analyze an environment. We're going to be focusing on an Oracle EPM OCI environment, which I'll show more details on here in a second. And we're going to migrate that from one location to a secondary location, and kind of exciting stuff. Show you how that all works. So what's actually happening today? So we're going to migrate a full Oracle EPM stack, which is running the almost latest version, EPM 11.2.9, although 11.2.10's out. And we're going to be doing that in the following fashion. We're going to have a source environment that's sitting in OCI US Ashburn East. It has an Oracle database host that's running on Linux that's on the back end. And we're going to target that over from Ashburn East over to Oracle's OCI region, US Phoenix West. So we're going to show you a functioning source environment with all the services running, kind of do a quick walkthrough on that. And then we're going to show you the migration in process. And then when that's complete, you'll see us log into the target environment and show you all the services running and connecting and all that kind of stuff. So you'll see kind of full end-to-end EPM functionality between the source and between the target. And what's kind of obfuscated in what you'll see today is a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff. So I'm going to talk about it here so you get a kind of feel for what's going on. The first thing that happens essentially is an assessment of the source and target environments. So we're going to say, you know, these are my source hosts, these are my target hosts, make sure there's, you know, we've accounted for any dependencies in those. Those are things like the underlying network and the source environment to the target environment, disk, things of that nature. And then there's going to be some preparation where it validates the network, the accounts, and then it's going to start the process of essentially transferring that content from Ashburn over to Phoenix, do some provisioning to make sure the security aligns, a verification step, and then a final cutover of the servers and final sync, and then it releases those and we're ready to test them. This last step is really more of a, if you think of a life cycle type model where you can do continual optimization and analysis. So you can keep track of, you know, how long it's taking for your replications to happen. And you can do things if the applications allow it, like auto scaling or auto parking. So. And here's just a real quick physical diagram of what's happening. We have two disparate data centers here for all intents and purposes. You can call them regions, but they're data centers. One's in US Ashburn East, one's in US Phoenix West. I have a Rackware RMM server. The Rackware host is a single physical, I shouldn't say physical, it's a single virtual Linux box that's sitting in OCI. That's running the Rackware software. And that host is basically connecting to our source on the left, which is Windows 2019 image running the EPM 11.2.9 stack with the backend database server that's running Oracle 19c on Linux. And it's going to replicate that over to the right to basically an identical set of servers. Okay. And with that, we will launch into the demo. So as you can see here, I've got a Windows image that's hosting kind of all of my Rackware connections and all that good stuff that I've launched. And I'm going to come in here into OCI so you can kind of see the compartment where all this stuff is running these instances. So we've got our two servers here in US Ashburn East that are our source, a VM server and a database server. And then we're going to switch from here over to US West Phoenix, where I have my two target servers running. And you'll see the exact same host names, but I've appended TGT or TGT2 to them just to kind of differentiate the names inside of OCI so that when I see them, I'm not confused as to what compartment I'm in, right? So I've just kind of given them a different host name at the tenancy level or at the compartment level. So now I'm going to launch the VM for the source environment. I'm going to log into EPM where all my services are up and running. And I'm just going to show you some quick validations, right? OHS is already up there and it's already running. And then I'm going to log into the workspace for EPM and kind of walk through the products that are in there and operational and working. So, you know, go to the Explore option, see my reports, come into consolidation and launch my HFM app, which is the generic comma app. You can do this obviously for any application, but I'm just using the samples because it's kind of quick and easy. And we're going to launch planning and go to the Vision app. And I'll open a form here that I know is valid and doesn't, you know, kind of have any issues. So there's a generic form there. And we'll go over to data management, take a look at FDMEE, where I'll show that there's some locations already out here. Haven't really loaded anything, but they're there. And last but not least, we'll go to Calc Manager and expand all of the connections so that we see that everything connects to its various child application objects between HFM planning and SBase. And then last but not least, I'm going to log in here to shared services and just show that I can retrieve users from the native directory. If you had an AD, then you could obviously configure that and it would replicate as well. In the case of our OCI lab, we don't have an AD, so we're just going straight native here. All right, and I'm going to log off. I'm going to close this out, and then we're going to take a look at the actual Rackware software interface. So moving on to Rackware. Actually, I take a step back. We're going to actually show you the host file first. So one of the things that has to change here, because I am moving data centers and I'm moving virtual networks, is we have to account for our host file. So I'm just going to take a quick shot here of showing you what that host file looks like on my source server. I didn't do it on the server itself because nobody wants to watch me navigate directory trees, but that will get updated at the end of the session on our target to reflect the new IP addresses. So this is the Rackware console login. So you set up a Rackware server. It's got its own web page, and we're just going to log in here. It's a generic admin account. And once we're logged in, we're going to look at a wave. And a wave is essentially what Rackware uses in order to define a set of servers that are going to be migrated or disaster recovered. So you can use this for one-time migration. You can use it for full disaster recovery. But what we're going to see in here is a couple things. So the first thing I'm going to point out is there's a parallel count, which is saying how many servers I'm going to run at the same time to migrate. And again, in this case, these are the same source and target servers we saw in OCI. And then I'm also going to show you that these little green check boxes are either green check boxes or kind of red X marks, depending on whether or not those are decided or determined to be the active ones when I click the play button. The two check boxes on the left that I kind of highlighted don't really do anything. So if you start using the software, you download it, install it, and you're like, what's going on? Why can't I, why aren't my check boxes checking anything? It's because they're kind of a false positive. You really want to pay attention to the stuff on the right-hand side under actions. So at this point, I've actually kicked off the migration or the DR event, and it is now starting to look at my hosts and examine them, as you can see here, and it's going to start the replication process to move these hosts from Ashburn East over to Phoenix. So depending on the type of host and the type of sync option you're using is what's going to drive the amount of time this takes. So we're doing a full sync live, so it's a little bit of a longer process. If we were just doing like the images to be turned on later, it's a little bit quicker. Okay, so now we're going to look at the DR policy. A DR policy is basically what defines a DR event. And you can edit this and you can set some different things like the scheduling, right? So we're doing a one-off schedule, but you can see here at one point I had this set for continuous. It's paused at the moment. And then I have the option to send notification emails when this is complete. So you can put your address in here, or you can put multiple addresses in here, and those folks can get emails. Like if you're doing, say, a nightly DR, or even an hourly DR, then you'll get emails. When this was set to continuous, I was getting a massive stream of emails. So needless to say, even though I played around with it, I turned it back off. All right, so through the magic of time lapse, you can see here that this Linux box took 7.5 minutes to do its full migration. So it's already migrated, the database is over, and it's done. The Windows host takes a little bit longer, right? Because the migration process has to count more than just file level objects. Like in a Linux instance, there's registry and other things. So it does take a little bit longer to do discovery at the microkernel level, and it takes a little bit longer to do the full migration. So you can see here, this took 32 minutes. It's actually a little bit long. I'm not quite sure why this one went a little bit long, but it's usually around actually 20 minutes, but OCI was actually a little bit slow when I went through this process. So, but you'll see here all the steps that it goes through, where it's synced the disk over, it's booted the new image, it's released the image, and it should be essentially ready for us at this point to connect to and start the migration or the validation process. So what I'm going to do here is show you that this is now my target IP addresses that I have to get set up on the new host before I fire up all my EPM services. So I'm going to connect to this host, and I'm going to modify the etc host settings under Windows System 32. So here we are. You can see the server has been rebooted, right? Without us telling it to. So that's because of the DR event. So whenever you log into one of these target servers that's live, you're going to see that it's restarted the target as part of the process. And we'll come in here and navigate on down. So we're going down to Windows, System 32, and then we're going to go to drivers, and then we're going to go to etc, and we're going to edit our host file. So for probably everybody on this call, this is like a no-brainer, but it's got to get done. So I forgot to copy this, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to grab the contents, whack what's in this file, because those are my old hosts and Ashburn IP addresses. Names stay the same. The only thing that changes is the two IPs. This was done at the same time on the Linux host, though I did not show that because nobody wants to watch me use VI in Oracle, because nobody wants to watch me type that much. So then I'm going to kick off my EPM start script. And there's a pause here because this is about a 20-minute process, give or take. And once it's all done, we come back into our target and we validate the environment. So we're back in workspace. You'll notice my host name and the URL hasn't changed. And we're going to go through the exact same steps where I open the Explorer. I'm going to launch the comma application. Then I'm going to launch the planning application. Vision, open the same form that we saw earlier. Same results. And then I'm going to go through the same process of going into data management. The data load workbench. Go into the calc manager, expand my items and make sure they're all still connecting the way they should. And last but not least, we'll go into shared services and we'll return some users, make sure the native directory is still working. And then we're going to log off. And that was a migration. So for a DR perspective, it's about as straightforward and easy as you could ask for. And let me share the full slide deck. Sorry there, a little technical glitch, little PowerPoint. Okay. So this was the last slide we looked at. So with all that said, I would like to open everything up for some questions. We actually have about 10 minutes left in the webinar for questions, so I welcome them. Happy to answer anything that pops up. A couple items I will start with just as kind of talking points. So one of the things that kind of got glossed over, but is important to keep in mind is this is not just a disaster recovery utility. It's also very useful for one-time migration. So for example, if you have a set of hosts on premise that need to move to the cloud, while a lot of the cloud providers provide utilities to do that, some of those are better than others. So you can install this and move those servers as a one-time event, or you can use it as an ongoing disaster recovery tool to help you automate what can be a lot of times a pretty tedious and long documented process. So one thing to keep in mind, you guys can go off mute if they have any questions, or you can write them in the Q&A section on your Zoom. There should be a Q&A, and then we'll be happy to answer those. I'm going to keep it open for about a minute. And then if nobody has any questions, we're going to wrap up the webinar. We appreciate everybody attending. If you should have any questions, you don't want to ask them in the Q&A, you're welcome to email either of these addresses, and we will get those answered and follow back up with you. And we'll also share any questions that come through directly that aren't company specific with all the attendees today. So I did have a question come in. How is it priced? So it is priced by server for the actual license, and it's pretty reasonably priced. We're basically looking at roughly $400 to $500 per server, depending on what you're looking at overall for the needs. There's different pricing for just a one-time migration versus overall, disaster recovery. And then there's the services, obviously, to stand it up, right? So there's usually some services around setting up the Rackware server itself, the RMM server, and then to deploy. It's not really an agent, but it is an open, or not an open, but it is an SSH client that exists on both Linux host or Windows host with the configuration of the private keys so the Rackware server can talk to it. Also, if you want pricing for your environment, again, just feel free to send an email to sales@irksolutions.com or email me directly at my address down there. And we can definitely speak offline, kind of talk to you with how many hosts you have, what environments you want to migrate, etc. Another follow-up question. Is this purely a cloud-only solution or work from on-prem to cloud instances? So yeah, this is agnostic. That's the great thing about it. One of the reasons why we really like it, we're very excited about this partnership, is because we have the ability to move on-prem to on-prem, on-prem to cloud, cloud to cloud, cloud to on-prem. So if there's a combination you can think of, Rackware should be able to move those machines, servers, workloads from one environment to the other. So you can certainly move from on-prem to cloud. Give it a little bit more to see if there's any other follow-on questions. Okay. Well, if there are no further, oh, I got another one. Okay, for DR, do I have to have a live instance on the other side? No, you do not. So there are stages of replication that are available within the product. I did what's called a full sync. So I took my live servers over to live target servers. You can do stage replication where you're basically just moving the image of the server over to storage in your standby site, and then plan on starting those up as needed in the event of an actual DR. That'll save you on costs, obviously, because you won't be running two sets of boxes in the cloud all the time. The other alternative is you could still have live servers on your DR side that are only turned on via schedule, scripted schedule, and then you run the Rackware, it validates it, says it's good, you shut it back down, and then you just schedule a periodic DR test to make sure those servers are working as expected. Another question. Hello, let's see. With Rackware, are there separate regions for DR? So Rackware doesn't really care where you DR to. So in other words, the software goes on the boxes, and then at that point, you determine where your DR site is. So for example, let's say you love Microsoft Azure, but you're not going to put all your eggs in a cloud basket, right? You could migrate those DR servers to an on-premise data center. You can migrate them to a different cloud provider. So I could go from Azure and say, well, I like Azure, but I also have AWS workloads or OCI workloads, and I'd like to keep my DRs for the environments, going cross-stream. So my Azure primary is in, or my server's primary is in Azure. I'm going to do my DR over in AWS, right? For example, but I have some AWS servers that's their primary home, but I'm going to DR those over to Azure. So you could do it that way. And again, if it's active passive, you would have to have something like a storage subscription in your passive to send those images to make sure that they're there. But essentially, that's kind of what it amounts to. Follow-on question around pricing: is the DR scenario 400 or 500 per VM per month or year? So that's the yearly charge, not a monthly charge. So it's a very cost-effective solution. You can pretty much do some back of the napkin math, count the number of servers you need to DR. So 5 prod servers, $500 a server, licensing per year, you're looking at roughly $2,500. And then, again, the amount of time it takes to stand up your DR, do a test, do a validation, and then be comfortable with the solution. So again, one of the things we're really excited about with this solution is the fact that the cost of ownership for companies to implement this compared to kind of what I'll call old school DR is much lower. We're able to leverage the software to do a lot of this for us. And I'll add that most of the major partners out there, including the vendors themselves, are partnered with Rackware because they know this fills a gap in their overall cloud solutions. So Oracle OCI, IBM, all these folks are embracing Rackware as well as the solution. So we're not we're in big company when it comes to offering this as an alternative for customers. Okay, and are there DR monitoring services? Yeah, so you can monitor this within the Rackware, the RMM console itself. And then in addition to that, like I said, there are notifications that you can configure that will let you know that your DR was successful, or if it failed, it'll send you a failure, and then you can go look at the RMM logs to understand why there was an issue. Maybe if you're doing a live replication, your source servers were turned off, right? That could be a problem. Or maybe you run out of storage where you're storing your VMs. So it'll log that, I'm out of space, and then you can go and address that based on the logging in the utility. So there is a lot of functionality within it. There's also, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but there's also an analysis service that we can deploy that basically goes out in your environment and will, basically detect the workload that needs to get moved, the number of servers, and help you understand what those costs are going to be to do your DR event or your one-time migration. So there is some functionality there to help you understand in your environment kind of what the total cost of ownership will be for whatever your DR solution or migration option happens to be. Okay, and with that, I think we're pretty much at all of our time. I want to thank everybody again for attending. If you do have follow-on questions, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to assist you with any of your support or Rackware needs. So thanks again, and everybody have a great day.